Hi there and welcome to this recording, which is entitled State of Behaviour, and it goes alongside the video that I made around suspensions. And this is really where we're going to look at survey data and try and unpick really what was happening in our school system in 2021-22. So let's get started. So all of the data that you're going to see is available. It's been published by the Department for Education. So if you just Google what's on the slide in front of you, you'll be able to find it too. Now there are loads of questions involved in these surveys, so far too much for one video. So I've just picked out a few questions that will give you a taste for what gets asked, and also hopefully a few that you'll find quite interesting. But before I show you survey data, I think it's always important to know how those surveys were created and who was asked, rather than just assuming that the answers that you see are truly representative of our school system. So let's have a look at that now. So who did the Department for Education ask? Well, it turns out there were two panels, one of teachers and leaders and one of pupils and parents. The first thing I'd say is that these panels do not appear to have been chosen because they would make up a good representative sample of educators in England. Let me explain why I would say that. So if we look at the numbers here, there were 1,338 school leaders who were on the panel and responded, and then 1,774 teachers. Well, clearly there are far more teachers in education than there are school leaders. And then secondly, if you have a look at the breakdowns of primary and secondary here and here, there should be far more primary respondents because there are far more people involved in primary education in England. So overall, these panels were definitely skewed towards secondary and school leaders. So that's something we need to be aware of. Secondly, I have searched through the document and I can't find any reference to alternative provision. So a couple of things about that. Firstly, I think it's really important that our colleagues in hospital schools and special schools and pupil referral units are asked these questions, and the pupils are asked these questions as well. And secondly, I think if this is designed to just be a reflection of mainstream education, that's something that the Department for Education should just make very clear right at the top of the document. Okay, so let's have a look at the first couple of questions, where I chose to look at the question related to how safe schools were in 2021-22 and how calm and orderly they were. So let's check it out. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight a couple of things here. The first question was whether or not school is a safe environment for pupils. And over here we have some responses from leaders. There were two waves, which is why it says June and March. And below that we have some response from teachers as well. Immediately you will see that on the whole, leaders are exceptionally positive about whether or not school is a safe environment for pupils. So every day, 82% and 86%, and if you include most days, then we have 98%. So that, as you're going to see, is a view that's not borne out in some ways, certainly when it comes to pupil views. And certainly there is something to be said about when leaders are responding to surveys like this, if they feel that there is a need for them to be positive, or if there is a genuine disagreement of views or a genuine detachment of perception. So secondly, we have a question here, school has been calm and orderly. Again, we have leaders' views here and teachers' views here, and you can see down here the colour code. So we have every day is the furthest to the left, and then we have most days, some days. The scores for never are quite low. You'll see the highest numbers down here when it comes to teacher perception. So I'm always fascinated by a bit of comparison, and clearly the DFE are as well, because they included some pupil views. So when pupils were asked to respond to the question, how many days has school been calm and orderly, every day they scored it at 16%. So 16% of the pupil panels said every day school is calm and orderly. The first thing to note is that that's very different from the leaders' perspective. 39% said on most days, so that's about 2/5. Then we had 33% on some days. I'm going to assume that some days is 2 or 1 day, because otherwise it would be the majority. And 9% said school is never calm and orderly. So if we have a look at that difference in opinion in a bit more detail, certainly at secondary level, if you're responding to the statement, how is school calm and orderly every day, 46% of leaders in one of these samples said it, 23% of teachers and 16% of pupils. That is the pattern every time. And I'm going to say right from the top that teachers have a far more accurate perception in compared to what pupils are seeing than leaders do across all of this data. And that's something that we need to consider when we're thinking strategically, because it may appear, if leaders genuinely think that schools are far more calm and safe than the pupils are actually experiencing, that there needs to be a lot more surveys done with students, a lot more student voice, a lot more pupil representation, perhaps in that strategic decision making. To give you another example, pupils have been respectful to each other every day. Now, you'll see the numbers drop certainly from safety. Only a third of leaders said that pupils have been respectful to each other every day. Teachers, 15%, pupils, 12%. So if we just ask a general question about behaviour, so what are the views on behaviour when we talk about being very good, good, neither good nor poor, poor or very poor, you can see here that if we're looking at poor or very poor, the numbers are incredibly low, as reported by school leaders. When it comes to teachers, we have definitely quite a bit higher, so 17-18%. Now, it's really interesting to me that that is very similar to the numbers actually much closer to those stated by pupils. So when it comes to really understanding what's going on in schools, I think there's a lot of convenience when you can talk to one person or one CEO of a MAT, a multi-academy trust that has many schools. But if you want to understand behaviour more and more through this survey, you're going to understand that the most accurate picture is going to come from pupils and teachers and not, in fact, school leaders. There is far more agreement there, unless we're going to claim that pupils and teachers have higher expectations of behaviour than leaders do, which I think is absurd to claim. So definitely strategically, this should have some impact for sure. So one way that's really important to look at pupil experience is based on bullying, and I think it's really important to understand that it is the perception that one is being bullied that is important, not necessarily a definition of bullying. It is useful to understand, I think, and to be taught from a young age what bullying is, but actually it's that feeling of being under attack that's going to trigger anyone's stress response system. And that's something which has a really powerful impact. Certainly research shows that the experience of bullying is associated with quite a few negative outcomes later in life. So it's definitely something that we should concern ourselves about in education. So just to have a little look at the data here, one thing I noted was that the highest number of pupils saying yes, I've been bullied was in the first year of secondary school. So we can see 30% of year 7s. Remember the sample size was about 300. And from here, you can see that actually the more settled numbers come later on. So we have lower scores here in year 10 and year 11, and actually the scores of within school bullying do drop. They're still obviously higher than we would want them to be, but they do drop in year 10 and year 11. The students who answered yes, I have been bullied, were then asked a further question, and they were given a list of possible reasons. Now that's obviously not really reasons for the bullying, it's reasons that they said were the kind of primary explicit cause of the bullying. And so I think it's interesting to look at what they responded. So 45% of them said the bullying was just based on the way that they looked. And then we have a significant drop to the other possible reasons that they were offered. So bullying based on sexual orientation, 16%. Then special educational need and disability, 12%. Then gender, 9%. Ethnicity, 9%. Nationality, 3%. And religion or beliefs, 3%. And I think this would be really interesting data to perhaps talk to students about and really start to unpick whether that's what they expected, whether that's what they've experienced themselves, and really dig into where this appearance-based bullying is happening and how it's happening, and whether or not we can find some ways to work with them and reduce it. Okay. So that was just a small sample of the questions involved in the survey. Hopefully you found a few of them interesting and enlightening. I really like to use research and data in my consultancy, in my training, and in my speaking. So if you are interested in any of those, please drop me an email at catstoneconsultancy@gmail.com. And I'm also quickly going to plug my book, which is The Excludables: From Mainstream Classroom to Prison Education, which is also very heavily research driven. So hopefully you found this useful, and I'll see you at the next data and research drop.